How you doing, and welcome back to Undertaker 365. I'm Jacob Vandenberg. I'm a licensed funeral director, and I'm the host of the series. The purpose of this video right now is to disclose to you some information that is a disclaimer about what our series is and what you can expect moving forward. Understanding that we're talking about the funeral industry, there's some extremely sensitive topics that we're going to be covering, and I want you as the viewer to understand that the information I'm disclosing to you is strictly informational. This is my opinion. The opinions that we express are solely coming from Undertaker 365 and me, Jacob Vandenberg, and certainly our field experts that we're interviewing. So with that, I encourage you to read our viewer disclaimer, understand that this is viewer discretion, and that we are covering a lot of sensitive topics, but really we want to be transparent about it and make sure that you understand that we're providing information based upon our opinions. So thank you very much. Hey, welcome back to Undertaker 365. This is Jacob Vandenberg. I'm a licensed funeral director and embalmer at Vandenberg Funeral Home. Today I'm joined with my colleague John Ligda of Ligda Funeral Service, and we're here today to bring to you, probably the first time ever, basically a tutoring session of what embalming is, what an embalming room or preparation care facility looks like. So we're giving you a quick run through of what this facility here at Vandenberg Funeral Home looks like. And although it could be different in every funeral home, they have some very basic items that every preparation care facility should have. So with that, we're going to give you a quick walkthrough. Every preparation facility should have an embalming table. Now these could come in different colors, sizes, materials.
Yeah.
Basic principles being it's a hard surface, non-porous, that has drain channels along the side and a hole at the bottom of the table for fluids to drain. So basic principle number one, every embalming room has a table of some sort. Here at the funeral home in Vandenberg's, we have two porcelain tables. John, you want to take, what would the second essential be in a mortuary room like this?
Well, I think absolutely essential in every morgue I've ever been in is a active water supply. So a source of water where we can flush the table constantly and keep water moving to protect ourselves and to flush any fluids. So here we have actually a nice hot and cold water supply. Okay, and what this is a hose, and we can actually use this hose two ways. We can run water through this hose to provide a source of fresh water to the table at all times, okay? Or we can reverse the flow and actually use the vacuum principles here, you know, in case we want to, you know, pull up any water that may be in a crevice or anywhere like that, okay? So again, what makes this nice is that not only do we have the option of running the water both ways, which is normal, we use the aspiration side like a vacuum or the water supply side, we also have hot and cold supply, so we can vary the temperature depending upon the needs of exactly the case that we're working on and what we're trying to accomplish.
Thanks, John. Again, we keep a very clean facility. I would say that the majority of funeral homes and embalmers, we strive for 100% cleanliness. So you could expect that any preparation care facility will have disinfectants. You'll see that on both tables. We have a disinfectant bottle here. We have antimicrobial soap that we use. So both tables will have that. We also, I think in a previous episode, we've gone over the purposes of this disc spray. It's a disinfectant spray made by a company that handles our embalming fluid, Dodge Company. We use that for obviously disinfecting orifices, so mouth, nose, and eyes, as well as any other object that we can come running into. John, I think the other element that every preparation room will have will be embalming fluid and an embalming machine.
Exactly. Yeah. Which is really the primary way in which we embalm. It's absolutely essential.
Absolutely. Besides our utensils that we use, the one vehicle in order to obtain the sanitation, disinfection, and preservation of a human remains is embalming fluid. So if you could, I'd like you to open up those drawers over there. And here at this funeral home, we use a company called Pierce. They, first and foremost, there's dozens of types of chemical. It's up to the funeral home or embalmer to select the few that they might like to use. There's different applications for each type of chemical, but the basic rundown being that you have embalming fluid, you have supplemental fluid, and you have cavity fluid.
Exactly. There's three classifications right there. You know, and you pointed that out. Here you have a supplemental fluid, okay, that helps us with distribution. Okay, then we have a cavity fluid. Then we have various kinds of arterial fluids that will mix depending upon the case and the specifics of every case that comes through here.
So some of the quick lingo, if you could, you might ask, like, well, what's your index? What do you got? What kind of fluid are you using? Index and arterial fluid is the level of the percentage level of formaldehyde, formalin base, however the chemistry would be of that makeup, correct?
Exactly, yeah. So a higher index fluid would contain more of a concentration of formaldehyde in the solution, and a lower index would be less. And then we can vary that depending upon what we're mixing it with. So more concentration of a lower index fluid could still have a kind of a strength of a higher index fluid using less. Okay?
Less water, or dilution.
Exactly, dilutions, exactly. So I know on my cases, whenever I'm working, I always run the maths behind it and make sure that I'm putting in the right consistency, so I get right in the neighborhood of where we need to be as far as preservation is concerned.
And that's all based off of weight, condition of the remains, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We adjust those as needed.
As needed, depending upon exactly the case, the height, the weight of the individual, the exterior, what's going on in the atmosphere around us, where they were, how long have they been deceased, what did they die of? So when we first get a deceased, and should say, when we place them on the table and we're looking at them, we're already working in our head, what is it I'm seeing? What is it that I'm going to need to select here so that we accomplish our task and we accomplish it well?
So the different indexes in the embalming fluid are extremely important. The other element that is obviously vital, it's the vehicle in order to conduct the embalming process. In today's day and age, we use a powered, pressured pumped machine. In this particular case, we use a porta-boy. Again, it's a very simple machine. It has a reservoir that we fill with water and embalming fluid. It has a hose. Sorry, I suppose we should have prepped for this. It's all right. There you go. The hose is going to be obviously what is moving the fluid or the chemical from the machine into the artery of the decedent individual, correct?
Correct.
Okay. General principles of an embalming machine. Obviously has an on-off. This particular model has a pulse function as well. Yeah. So the machine will actually act like a heart and pulse and apply pressure to the flow of the fluid.
That's correct.
The embalmer will have two gauges to operate. One being the flow of the fluid through the machine, the other being the pressure. You can increase the pressure and decrease the pressure dependent upon conditions.
Exactly, yeah. You can vary the pressure and vary the rate of flow simultaneously or independent of one another.
What would one embalmer run into that they would have to adjust pressure
in a particular case? What would be one reason?
Well, depending upon how long the deceased has been deceased, if they've been in a refrigeration kind of case or they've been deceased for a day or so before we're even notified, what tends to happen from the moment of death is coagulation of body fluid, specifically blood. And what that creates, as we know, or we commonly call those clots in our body. Okay, so when blood clots, it thickens up and it creates a restriction in the arteries and veins. So that creates a blockage, and so sometimes we need additional pressure just to move that fluid through, kind of to give it a kick so we can get all those fluids out.
And I would encourage the viewer, if you're intrigued at all, as you can tell, John and I are about this. This has come a long way. I mean, we take this for granted. The days of my grandfather being a embalmer, they had the
gravity injector, right?
The gravity. So
hang it up
in order to apply pressure and flow, it was hung. The reservoir was hung up and suspended in air, allowing gravity to take over. Then you had the good old hand pressure, the hand pump embalmers. So we take this for granted daily, and it's a huge piece of equipment that serves all the function that we need.
Probably the greatest invention that this industry has ever come up with in the 100 plus years we've been, in existence. So,
obviously, to any industry that is having people that are employed through the business, safety of the employee is number one and paramount to a healthy, functioning business. We do not take that for granted in Vandenberg Funeral Home at all. At our preparation care facility, there are several safety functions that are critical to our embalmers. First being the shower, freshwater shower. This is going to be utilized in a case where, for instance, chemical splashed, bodily fluids splashed. The embalmer would leave the area that they're working in, come over, pull the handle, and have an immediate source of freshwater shower, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Have you ever had that issue?
Yeah, actually I have had that issue. Just the other day I was working, and what happens is sometimes you get splashed, right? Or something just hits the right way and can splash back off the table or something like that. And I had it hit me, close to the eye and near the nose, and instantly I had to go over and I had to, get fresh flush water on my face and get rid of it, because these are caustic chemicals. And if we're not careful, I mean, you leave that there for a few seconds or a minute, that's going to start to burn. It's going to start to eat through your skin, and it can be painful.
Even with the regulations that the federal government's put on the chemicals that we use, it's still extremely pungent.
Exactly. And it doesn't matter how many safety precautions you take, there's always that little chance that something's going to happen. So that's why we have insurance policies like this. We can go and get fresh water and clean ourselves off right away. And in that case, I was able to do it and get right back to work.
Right. So, the other element that we have at this funeral home is an eye wash station. Again, this isn't specific just to our funeral home. The majority of preparation facilities are required to have these items.
Exactly. In fact, this is the minimum requirement for every funeral home in the state, probably in all 50 states, really. I think OSHA regulates that an eye wash is the minimum you have to have, and then followed up by, of course, a drenched shower.
Very good. So as you can tell, very simple to understand. The person that has an incident that can walk over, even if it's they're fully immersed in, they're able to find, they know where the location's at. They walk up, they push the handle, put their face down, water splashes up immediately to their eyes. They're able to flush their eyes properly and at that point hopefully be okay enough to exit the room and then seek the medical treatment.
And that is a really nice eye wash station, I just have to say, because this one actually has a drain attached to it. And sometimes you'll find ones that are older that only have the ability to wash your eyes, and then you get the water everywhere around yourself. Exactly, yeah. So
the other element that this funeral home has that other funeral homes may not have, that I found to be one of the best investments that we've ever made, is a lift system that is able to lift the individuals up off the embalming stations for dressing and then placement in caskets. It's a one-man operation. This particular model has a capacity, weight load capacity of 1,000 pounds. It really has transitioned the preparation facility to allow for a one-man operation. So quite literally, your embalmer could embalm a human remains disinfect, sanitize, dress, cosmetize, and casket an individual by themselves.
Exactly.
Literally one of the best investments that we've ever made.
That's probably the second best or first after the embalming machine, you know. This totally affords us safety. You know, you're not lifting remains, you're not putting your back, your legs, your arms in a potentially compromised position. So
I'll share a little personal story on this. I remember when I was first cutting my teeth in the funeral business, and on a Saturday afternoon, if we had a funeral in the morning and we had a layout for Sunday, the director, embalmer at that time, would come back from the funeral on Saturday, dress, cosmetize, and prepare the remains for casketing. And oh, by the way, humans these days are no longer small, so we're all average size to heavy people. That person can't lift the individual into the casket. Getting that phone call in the afternoon on a Saturday when you're not scheduled to work, have to come in just to lift the remains into a casket, really put a damper on what you're doing Saturday afternoons. Yep. So, again, I can't stress enough how important this is for safety of the employee, but really it's a great added benefit to this funeral home. It revolutionized how we do our business back here.
absolutely.
Any other life safety things that you could think of for the employees that, we have ventilation. Probably something, I mean, one of the other things that's extremely important in how we do business here. An embalming room has to have ventilation. Besides the HVAC that you have in your facility, you have to have a reversed ventilation to bring fresh air in and exit the chemical. And the idea is that you don't want this eye level, because if you put on the ventilation and you're working, you don't want the chemicals coming from the machine or from the table upwards that you're breathing in. Yeah. You want them going down and out. Can't really stress that enough.
No, you can't. Yeah, exactly. You want to bring fresh air in from high and push out the bad air down below.
That's exactly right.
And that's not there because of things like you might think like smells or anything icky like that. It's really there to protect us from these chemicals, which are very dangerous. You know, if you breathe them too much, I mean, they can compromise your
ability to think and your ability to work. Really.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean,
burning sensation in your eyes, all the way to loss of ability to function, because the chemicals can be strong, particularly if there's a spill. I mean, there's various things that could happen as the preparations begin.
Exactly.
All right, so we gave you a quick run through of what you could expect to see in an embalming room, a morgue, preparation care facility, whatever word you want to put at that. It's exactly that. It's an embalming room. It's an area that we take remains. We begin sanitation, disinfection, and preservation of human remains. It's a very clean, sterile environment. It's critical to have that. I am not afraid to show the public or anybody that we serve our facilities here. I'm very proud of what we do here. I'm proud of the people that are able to work here and provide the service that we need. And I think it's important, just critically important, to explain to you the general principles of what embalming is. So an embalming 101, right? I mean, you probably could go online and figure this out. It was probably, shot in the 60s or 70s, and you're going to get some old dark dingy room, and that's not what you're seeing today. You have a bright lit room, clean environment.
Clean, yeah. All things considered, this should be, and in most cases, this is the cleanest room in the building.
True.
Okay? I mean, it's well taken care of. We're here, to protect ourselves. So you don't want to go to work in an unsafe environment. So
correct.
Absolutely, I find that this room tends to be the brightest in some way. Yeah, very clean, healthy room to be in.
Very true. So today we're joined by our good friend Mike. Mike is a mannequin. He was provided to us by a local EMT program. So for the EMTs, paramedics that are training and going through school, we were fortunate enough to take into Mike to show the viewers generally what is done during an embalming. So, John, we get back from a place of death. We have our stretcher, our cot. We bring the individual into the preparation room. They may or may not be wearing some type of hospital gown. Mike is wearing a hospital gown today. Again, we like to put, we want to treat everybody very, very honorably, and we feel that a part of that honor is to provide them comfort and and properly treat them with the decency that they deserve, right?
Absolutely, the way we would treat one of our loved ones if this was, our mother, father, brother, sister.
So we transferred Mike from the stretcher, from the place of death, into the preparation room. We have him on our embalming table. He has a smock on from the hospital. So first steps that an embalmer is going to do would be what?
Well, we're probably going to disinfect the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. And the way we would do that is we would take a alcohol-based disinfectant and we would literally apply it into the eyes and the nose and the mouth, okay? And we would let that sit there for a few seconds, and then we would take some fresh cotton, okay, and we would just disinfect those orifices using cotton to absorb both the alcohol-based solution we applied and to soak up or collect anything, any germs or bacteria that may be present in those areas.
Right. So then the next step I would typically do would be I would undress the individual if they're dressed. Understand that in some situations when we pick up human remains, they might be in a body bag if we're at a nurse or at a hospital facility. So there's a step that we would be taking to take the individual out of the body bag. That could be kind of a workout sometimes depending upon the situation. So we would be taking them out of the container, the bag. We'd be undressing them. So we'll go ahead and undress Mike. The blue sheet underneath, just for the viewers today, blue sheet is just to protect Mike from our sterile table. Obviously, this was provided to us by medical field, and we want to be able to give the mannequin back clean, obviously. So typically, this would not be on the table. That's what I'm trying to say.
Correct. And usually, what I do is I usually place some sort of cotton over the genitalia just to protect the dignity of the individual. That's not, when we're in the back here working, we don't see the things that maybe the other people in the world may see. And what I mean by that is that we're here to perform a very sacred act, a very important duty. And so we're looking to restore everything. We're not looking at people like an object. We're looking at them like they're our loved one, and we're trying to restore them and bring them back so that their loved ones can say one last goodbye to them.
That's right. That's a great point. Thank you very much for identifying that, because that's absolutely critical in the part of the process we're doing. What we're doing here is science. I mean, we are
art and science combined back here.
I mean, so we take this extremely serious. Yes. This is, like you pointed out, a sacred trust that families instill upon funeral homes and embalmers, and we want to provide them that dignity and the decency that they deserve. So we have gotten to this point. John pointed out earlier the fresh water source that we'll have. Oh, pardon me, I got the wrong thing. This is an embalming hose.
Yep, sorry.
The fresh water source. At this table here, we have the same thing. We would unravel the hose. We would come up here. We would typically place the hose up towards the head end of the individual. And for the viewer to understand, if you go to the dentist, there's typically fresh water that's being run while you're at the dentist.
That's exactly
It's a
right.
similar circumstance here.
Right.
Fresh water always brings a sense of cleanliness to the table. So again, we need fresh water to perform what we're doing.
Exactly. And we're always flushing the table. We're always running water down on the table. That hose is always there during this process.
John, what would be the next step that you'd be working on?
Well, the next step I would take would probably be to close the eyes and the mouth and to position them in such a way that they have a pleasant appearance, okay?
Setting the features, right?
Setting the features is exactly right.
The technology, the terms that we want to use.
The technical term would be setting the features. So what I like to do is, I was kind of trained in an older school method, so usually what I do is I place a little bit of cotton in the eyes just to help keep them closed, okay? And we position them in the lower the closing is the lower 2/3 of the eyelid, okay? Make sure the eyelashes are straight, okay? Because that's how we wear our eyelashes are always straight, okay? That gives a more pleasant appearance, okay? Make sure that the mouth is closed, and if necessary, if someone doesn't have a teeth, because sometimes older people who pass away sometimes have partials or dentures,
yeah.
Okay? That's not uncommon for people of all ages today. And so if they don't have their teeth, I can easily provide that with a couple of either cotton or another instrument that we would use, a mouth former, but I prefer cotton myself. It's an old school technique, but it works really well for me. And so So that's pretty much what we would do to get started.
Some of the other tools that we may use depending upon the situation, and I want to bring this to attention because I think there's an urban myth out there that we're sewing mouths shut and we know that we're suturing eyelids, and John just, I think, debunked that. We again, there's a reverence to what we do and there's a science to what we do, and fortunate enough for us, we live in a world now where there's tools and equipment that we could use that we don't have to do things like that.
Right.
So some of the things that we might use would be like a mouth former. This would be placed in the mouth in place of dentures or teeth.
It gives it an appearance that the person would have teeth.
And this may or may not stay in the individual after the process. It could be removed. Again, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create that look of pleasantry, normal, being normal.
Exactly. The person isn't necessarily supposed to have a smile. They're not supposed to have a frown. They're supposed to look at peace and at rest.
Correct. The other instrument we might use would be what we call an eyelid, eye cap or eye closure. Again, we'd be placing these inside the eyes. It's like a contact lens.
Like a contact. Sits right on
Sits right on the actual eye, and it has a little bit of rigidness to the exterior of it. And the idea there is the eyelid would be able to rest on there and not move up.
Right.
Again, two little things that may or may not stay in the individual during the embalming process.
Right.
Okay, so John, we set the features. We're both pleased on how Mike looks.
Yep.
I think that the family will be happy with the appearance. What would be the next step that we start to work through?
Next step we would do, and I should say, during the time that we would be setting features, okay, or we were placing a hose on the table, while we're working, we're also examining features on the deceased to see what kind of arterial solution we're going to want to use, what kind of chemical composition we're going to come up with, okay? So at this point, we'd probably be filling our machine with chemicals and certain dyes. And once we filled our machine, then what we would do is come back to the deceased and we begin selecting vessels and areas in which we want to raise an artery to begin the arterial injection process, which is the actual technical embalming process itself.
Right, so we probably got to the point of, well, how does embalming happen? Embalming happens in your human remains body is a closed circuit, right? I mean, it has a heart, it has a machine, a pump, and there's arteries that come from that, and there's veins that go back to it. And the very basic principles of what embalming is that we're stopping that closed circuit by, in this particular case, the common carotid artery. Excuse me for bungling that up.
That's okay. No,
right common carotid.
Right common carotid artery.
Which would be right along the clavicle.
Clavicle, right.
Right?
Clavicle, exactly.
That would be where your incision would be made. And the embalmer would proceed to dissect to find the artery.
Exactly.
And then a part of that, there's also a vein, right?
Correct. There's the vein that lies actually superficial to it because it's above the heart. So the vein, you would raise that as well. And the principle is that we... blood goes out to the vessels on the arteries and it returns on the veins. Okay, that's how it works in all of us. And we use the same principle. We just interrupt the circuit using a pump, replacing the heart. And so we're going to inject a solution in on the arteries and we're going to drain on the vein for all that comes back on the venous system.
So John, what am I putting in the hose here from the embalming machine?
Okay, he's putting in what's called a cannula. And it's really just an adapter that fits between the hose itself, and this would be the part of the cannula that goes inside the artery. Okay?
Right. So that would be put in through the artery.
Exactly.
Right?
Right. Close to the heart here. Okay? It would sit in there kind of like this.
I think the viewer knows it's not going to be perfect to what we're doing today.
Exactly.
It's just general introduction to what we do.
We would inject then, turn on the machine.
Right, we would turn the machine on. We would adjust the pressures accordingly. Is there an average that you normally would use? I mean, I could tell you usually between 10 and 20, and depending upon the scenario, I might pulse. I could run straight and just open up the flow a little bit, right?
Right. You know what I do is I just ride the flow. to be honest with you. You know, I start slow and then we build up. We see what kind of drainage we're getting.
Right.
Okay, you can tell right away, you know, if things are going well or not.
If you're getting a good flow through the body.
Exactly.
And just so you understand that, the closed circuit, back to the closed circuit element of what we were discussing is that, so the fluid's going to go in through the artery, it's going to circulate through the body, so it's going to go down the legs,
Exactly.
up
All
both
the way
sides of the legs, down through the
Down the
arms,
arms.
through the fingers, all the way to the fingertips, back through the back of the head, circulate through the brain, come back and drain through the vein. Correct?
That is absolutely correct. Yeah.
And as the process goes on, what you might notice, and what we didn't point out earlier, is that most embalming fluids will have a tint to it or a color.
Yep.
We could add dye to this as well. So if we're looking for more of a darker color, we may apply some dye to the fluid. But this is extremely important that it's colored. And the reason it's colored is that we can see it as it's flowing through the individual. As the fluid's permeating into the skin and the vessels, we should be able to start seeing the embalming fluid saturate the tissue.
Within
correct?
seconds, actually. Yeah, within a minute or two, depending upon the flow, right away you can see an almost instantaneous change of where it's penetrating the tissues. And that's also, Jake, that's how we know if we are getting good distribution, or if we need to maybe select a different site
Right.
in which to inject
That's a
that
whole
fluid.
different element of what we do as well. I mean, this is the most basic,
Basic.
common area that embalmers will go to first. However, there are circumstances where we're not getting good distribution. The artery collapses, the vein collapses. You're not happy with the performance of the fluid being distributed through the body. So then we have how many other points of injection?
Well, technically we almost endless, but no, really the most common ones we'd have 5 other injection
So
sites.
6 total injection sites.
Correct.
However, that could also be adjusted. There could be other points of access as well.
Exactly.
And I think we'll leave that specifics to when we go and talk to our friends at the mortuary school. I think we'll allow the professionals to.
Exactly.
I mean, although John and I are professional here, and we know other access points, it's entirely too difficult for us to
Explain in
to
a
you.
short episode
Exactly.
how we would do that.
So,
but, yeah.
just real quick, the 5 other points we have: the right common carotid,
Right common, left common carotid.
We have the left femoral.
Femoral artery and the right femoral artery, and then up we have the axillaries, which are just on this side.
Right underneath your bicep.
Exactly.
So, and
Right and left. So that's how you get 2, 2, 2, 6.
correct. And the reasons you have those different access points would be that if you're not getting solid enough distribution down the left leg, you could go into the femoral area, use an incision, shoot the arterial fluid in, hopefully get distribution through the leg.
Through the leg,
So
right.
you're having proper preservation.
Exactly.
That's more work for the embalmer. There's terminology. Oh, I had a 3-pointer, I had a 6-pointer, I had a 4-pointer.
Yeah, because Jake walked in and said, I had a 4-pointer, I know instantly what he's talking about.
We had a 2-hour-long embalming.
2-hour-long
process.
involved, exactly.
So, I mean, we try not to, we want to avoid those when we're able to, right?
Well, exactly. And we do that sometimes depending upon the solution. There are ways we can minimize the chances of that.
Sure. So one of the things that we talked about when we're able to see the fluid, and the area that I am always looking for, obviously besides the face, because I think that's majority of people looking at fingertips.
Fingertips, absolutely.
Fingertips are the
Your
quickest-
nails.
Right, the nail beds. Specifically, and not to single out a demographic of people, but the older people have poor circulation towards the end of their life.
They do.
Majority of them do. Let me back up. And poor circulation will lead to staining, or the proper term being, is it lividity?
Liver mortis. Yeah.
Liver mortis, thank you, okay. So in order to remove that staining, the non-technical term is what I would call it, we are now using techniques called massaging. Right? And if you're not getting immediate results from your embalming starting, you have clots built up somewhere in the body. So you may notice that the embalmer starts massaging from the feet all the way up, and you're applying pressure, and we're using
soap and water.
Soap
Antiseptic
and water.
soap and water, and it's just like a massage, and it's like a bath. And we just help all that solution through the body to help penetrate those tissues.
And you'd be amazed when you start applying that technique, how quickly the clots will start to disperse, and be removed through the vein during the embalming process. And what that's doing, it's two-pronged. Obviously, you're now disinfecting the body and cleaning, but you're also able to get better distribution of that embalming fluid, arterial fluid, excuse me, and you get, ultimately getting a better result.
Absolutely, and it really can turn a multi-point injection into a one-point injection, like we were just talking about,
Right.
because you're helping get that fluid through the body. There's an old story about the old-time embalmers, ones that are 50 years ago, who would come into a room and begin the embalming process. Select an artery, begin injecting a solution, light a cigarette and walk away. And that's not that's an old joke.
Right.
But we don't do that anymore. Well, I don't
It
know if we-
requires, the embalming procedure requires 100% of your
physical strength.
Your commitment to what you're doing. right?
Exactly,
Your
exactly.
attention.
Your attention, right. We're not walking away. We're actually working the whole time. So when we're here, no matter how long we're here, we're working every second to restore the deceased to a beautiful appearance, so that their loved ones, again, can have one last goodbye.
So, part of our job too is obviously we're highly paid manicurists.
That's right. Yeah, really.
So during the embalming, if we're having a case where it's minimal attention to massaging,
Right.
we're cleaning the nail beds, we're giving them a light, clean brush,
Yep.
getting underneath the cuticles, cleaning that up,
Filing
down if
okay.
needed.
Haircut.
Haircut.
Washing.
We'll trim around the ears for men. We'll trim around if they have any facial hair. We'll clean that up, make sure it's all tidy.
Yep.
For women, I am constantly just cleaning the hair.
Oh,
I
me
feel
too.
it's-
Yeah.
Again, I think that's part of the massaging aspect as well. But if they have any length of hair, I'm always cleaning that. Just, it's just I think it's pretty much just natural to do.
Exactly.
So another thing that I think is extremely important, you mentioned this being a sacred act, something that we're doing, we're held to a high level of standards. The equipment that we use, the utensils, you will not see a good embalmer leave equipment or tools, utensils on the human remains.
That's correct,
That's
yeah.
something that I recall being preached to us every opportunity they could during embalming school. So you will not. So short of the cannula going into the artery, the hemostat being placed into the vein for proper drainage, you should not, for any length of time, have any utensils or tools being placed on top of the human remains at any time during the embalming process.
Yes, this is a table where we place our instruments freely, okay? Our loved ones are not tables, they're humans, okay? They lived a long time, they lived an important life, so we treat them with respect, and we don't place things on them that we wouldn't place on them if they were still living, breathing, and alive.
So some of the very common tools, and I feel like we're kind of jumped around here, but that's okay. I think it's important to identify. So any embalmer will have a grip or a toolbox, so to speak. Some of the very common tools, we already pointed out a cannula. We have any standard pair of medical scissors.
Scissors, exactly.
You could have trauma shears. This is great for taking off clothing if needed, or any type of
Aneurysm hooks are probably essential, right?
These are going to be the tools that are utilized to do the dissection, to find the artery and the vein, and they're a dual-sided tool. You have a blunt side, and then you have the hook that's required to clean or to actually dissect and go into to find the artery. Really important tools.
Absolutely. Actually, these are extensions of our hands and our fingers, okay? So we're not using our hands. All of these are extensions of our hands and our fingers so that we can do the work that we need to. And again, we're staying safe, but also we can be very precise.
The technical term for this, I actually don't recall. I call it
fixation.
Fixation clamp. I call it, I was going to say a cannula clamp. But what this is, it looks like a pair of scissors, but they apply pressure and they fixate an object into a location. So when the cannula is placed into the artery, we're taking these scissor-like objects and we're placing them over the cannula, which is inside the artery, and we're clamping down so that when the machine's turned on, the pressure is not going to pull that cannula out and create a big mess. So this is keeping it fixated in a location that we are trying to obtain the proper location for that tool, right?
Exactly. And if you were watching earlier when I said about a fluid that splashed one day last week, I just didn't secure that correctly. I thought I had. And what happens is once you turn on the pressure, it's going to go the other way. It's going to slide out, and then all of a sudden you're shooting fluid, where you don't want to be shooting fluid. And it's another reason it's good when you start out. You want to start out with a small flow. That way you're not spraying everything. You minimize the chance that if something goes wrong, you're not have fluid exposed everywhere.
Sure. In any embalmer's grip, you're going to have obviously a scalpel.
Yeah.
I just placed this blade on today, so this is a clean, sterile blade. This part of the process is used in the very beginning when you're about to make your incision, depending upon where your location of point of entry will be. It's disinfected, it's dried, it's placed back in the grip. At least that's what I do.
That's exactly what I do too. It's used only for one thing, and that is to make an incision. And from that point forward, you want to disinfect it, you want to put it back. Why? Because we don't need to have a sharp object on the table that's not going to be needed for the rest of the operation. So you want to put that away, and you want to respect those kind of sharp instruments. If you respect them, they'll respect you.
Correct. And as you can expect, any other general hygiene, you'll have a toothbrush,
yeah.
You'll be able to clean the inside of the mouth. Obviously, upon passing, we want to make sure that you're cleaning and having a general hygiene area, correct?
Exactly. The same way we would clean ourselves up in the mirror every morning.
That's right. I already pointed out what the hemostat would be used for, but during the embalming process, again, when we have a vein, we have an artery. The vein is what's expelling the blood, the fluid. At a certain point during the embalming process, you'll see a transition from blood to embalming solution, and that's when you've had a full circuit removal of all blood, and now you're getting that firm preservation of the tissues. So this is just utilized to go inside the vein, and once I remove my hand, it opens up that vein.
Yep.
And that's really important, and I think that people might not understand, is that your artery is more like a straw.
Exactly.
It's rigid, and it's hollow inside.
They easily collapse.
A vein will collapse. A vein
right.
is flat.
Vein
Unless
is
full.
Exactly.
Right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, veins collapse, arteries do not.
Right.
If your artery collapses, well, go to the hospital.
All right, so these are some just general tools that you'll find in any type of embalmer kit or embalmer grip. Obviously, we have a lot more that we work with, dependent upon the scenario. We have to be prepared for anything. So this is my grip here at the funeral home. It'll be found with my cosmetic kit. It'll be found with a lot of different chemicals and other applications of product that we need to do. So the next step after we've had a full embalming procedure, we've had a full distribution of all the arterial fluid, you might have a little bit left in the tank. Dependent upon the scenario, I was kind of taught that you might want to just take it, reverse the cannula to go upwards so that you're getting distribution now into the face. Although you do get that if you have generally a good distribution on a normal embalming downwards, you'll have that through the face. But if you're looking for just a little extra, you turn it around. Instead of shooting downwards, you're going to shoot upwards. And I say the word shoot. That's
probably not the best way. Inject up.
Inject upwards towards the face area.
Exactly.
And again, that's if you're not getting the firming or the setting of those features. Correct. You're going to want to have a little bit extra fluid up there so that you might be able to take out the denture former, the mouth former, or the eye caps.
Exactly. Or just rehydrate the face the way we would if we had moisturizer.
Exactly. All right. So we've done with our arterial solution injection. We are now at the point where I would be cleaning up the utensils, table. I'd be allowing the remains to kind of settle a little bit before I proceed with the next step, which is going to be called our aspiration. So this is kind of the part where some guys wait a little while to do this. I've always been kind of the trade to just why wait? Let's get it done with.
Yeah.
John, the trocar is going to be behind that, the soap bottle over on that side, if you could. And as John mentioned earlier, with our fresh water source, we have a reverse vacuum on our fresh water. So John would turn let's go ahead and make sure that we have.
Let's make sure we got it going in the right way. We don't make a mess here.
Perfect to me. All right, so we have the freshwater hose that is now reversed through a vacuum here and adjusted by this handle here. What this does is it comes back up through this, plumbed, down into the vacuum, down into the sewer. Goes right into what you see at the bottom of the tables here is an oversized urinal.
Oversized urinal. It's like a toilet, basically.
It's a basin. Yep, a toilet basin.
You know, we collect everything. Remember, water is key. It keeps everything safe. So just like we were always running fresh water on the table, now whatever gets collected in this hose mixes again with fresh water when we flush it away.
Yeah, because I mean, it's if you have solids, you need to have solids with water to have a full flush evacuation through the sewer system. So the big, huge utensil that you have here in front of you is what we call a trocar. This object is going to be used for the aspiration process as well as the cavity treatment, right, John?
Exactly.
Where would the embalmer insert this part of the embalming procedure?
Well, usually around the umbilical cord in any deceased, okay? So when you find that, it's usually 2 fingers up and 2 fingers to our right, or the deceased's left, is usually a good point, okay? And then we use anatomical guides to know exactly where that, you know, where we would.
Right. So, because in embalming school, obviously, we went through all of our courses that required us, the anatomy class, and all the requirements, dissection, and knowing where all of our organs are at.
Exactly. I could tell you just by looking at someone where their heart is, where their lungs are, where their liver is. I know how to.
John, the heart's over right underneath the left side.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, right. Yeah.
More centrally positioned.
More centrally positioned.
All right, so that might be a common thing that a lot of people don't understand as well. So the first thing that I normally would try to do is, again, like John said, you go to your umbilical cord or your belly button. It's 1 inch up, 1 inch over. That's usually
I use 2 fingers.
Okay,
You know.
that's close. This has a very sharp point. Again, it has some holes, and the point has holes as well. The idea here is 2-pronged. 1, you're removing fluid in the cavity, and 2, you're piercing the organs so that we can treat it viscerally through the cavity treatment. So we'll go ahead and we'll puncture the human remains. We'll aim directly up to where the heart is, and we'll do what we call a heart tap.
Heart tap, yeah.
The idea is if there's any blood left remaining in the heart area, we want to evacuate that, aspirate it out of the remains into the sewer system, so that we can begin the rest of our aspiration.
And it's important to note too that this is all mixed with embalming fluid, which actually renders the blood and the other elements sterile. You know, not sterile, but as close to it as possible, so that when we say we're putting that into the sewer system, it's not as contaminated as people may think. We're not putting a lot of bad stuff in the sewer. When it mixes with that arterial solution, that cavity solution, that's what makes it safe, okay, or safer.
Right, and that's every funeral home. Every funeral home.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, and that's not just specific to us.
No, it's every funeral home. Right, exactly.
They all go into the treatments, water treatment, and into sewer treatment.
Exactly.
So, okay, so we did a thorough aspiration process. That could take a couple of minutes. You want to be as thorough as you can. You want to pierce every organ if you can. What I've noticed is you may not be getting a lot of fluid withdrawal. People that are older and may have been laying in bed for a long time would have more fluid in their lungs.
Right.
You really want to concentrate on getting those lungs completely drained. They're going to have a lot of fluid there if they've been, non-ambulatory and not moving.
Exactly.
So you're going to get the entire top portion of the cavity. Then you're going to turn and you're going to come downwards. You can get the kidneys.
Exactly.
You're going to get the intestinal area, lower intestines, and you're going to do a thorough aspiration there. So, okay, we did that for a couple minutes. We're going to come over. We're going to want to do a quick drain. Make sure we get all the stuff out of the trocar. We'll do that. Okay, great. Go ahead and pop that off. We're going to get some fresh water to run through that again. We'll have fresh water. Then we'll come back up. We're going to place the fresh water back up on top of the table. And then to really finalize, before we get the final disinfection going of the remains, we're going to do the cavity treatment.
Which is basically, we basically reverse now the trocar. And
this is back to the gravity, right?
Back to gravity, okay? This gravity still works to this day. This is the best way to do it.
So earlier you mentioned cavity fluid.
I did.
And that, as you can see, does not have any color. It looks like water.
It does. It looks like water, but it's not water.
It's not. It's very strong.
Very strong.
Highly toxic index that's going to viscerally treat the now pierced organs.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. So you would just take the top off of that. There's a thread here on this little guy, and you attach the bottle here, and then you just let it drain.
Keep it low, not get any flow. Get it higher.
Once you get high, then you get some flow going. And there's a way to stop that. There's like a little stopcock here, but it's really just it prevents air from getting in.
Bubbles. Yep. Exactly. So that you're going to do depending upon the size of the individual, primarily one bottle. If it's a larger person, somebody that's more my size, you're probably going to want to have 2.
Yeah. Exactly. Or we could do 3 on you. But.
Yeah, I know. I'm a little large.
But yeah.
All right, so we did all that. Obviously, we're going to be cleaning that instrument. We'll be running fresh water through it.
Exactly.
That will go back into a sterile area once we're done with the entire process. So we now have an opening that we need. We have 2 openings that we need to close. We're able to use a trocar applicator. So this has a little button, and what this does is it comes in, we kind of screw it in a little bit, it's like a corkscrew almost, and that actually covers and
seals the hole.
Seals the hole where you just did your aspiration. You could, if you did not want to use a button, you could do some suturing as well.
Exactly.
All right, so now we have an incision mark that we need to close. So we have our trusty old suture needle.
Exactly.
We'll have some suture.
Some ligature here.
Ligature.
Yeah.
Just get some thread,
Some thread, yeah, exactly.
So we'll cut a little bit of the ligature out, and then the embalmer will begin to do the suturing of the wound, the incision mark, right?
Which is only about maybe 2 inches at most. So.
Right, and we're taught different applications of how to suture. Baseball thread, you have
I use an intradermal worm stitch.
Intradermal worm stitch. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah,
Thank you. That's why I brought the professional in today.
It covers the area very well, and you really can't even tell that there was ever a blemish there to begin with.
So obviously that's an entrance point. It's an opening that we created in the body.
Right.
So now we're closing it with suture and ligature. We're suturing with ligature. We may want to put in some drying compound. Which is more or less like a fine sand.
I say, that or it is actually it's a lot like sand. That's a good way to say it. That or almost like wood. Wood
chip,
not a wood chip, but sawdust.
Oh yeah, sawdust, but it's not sawdust.
It's not sawdust, but it has the absorption property.
Right, and that's the key. We're looking for absorption. If there were to be any type of leaking issue there.
Right.
So obviously we're suturing that back up and we're closing the incision. However, now there's holes that are there. So we want to apply some drying compound in there if we can.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have the remains are embalmed. We're very happy with the appearance. We are going to do a thorough cleaning.
Right. Yeah, we would roll the individual.
Probably not necessary to use any disc spray anymore. So we would probably be using at this point our antiseptic soap. We could use a sponge, a fresh sponge, or a clean cloth.
Sure.
We'll go ahead and do a thorough cleaning of the entire remains. Then we'll begin to dry off with some dry towels.
Exactly.
And then the final steps would be crossing the hand. And unfortunately, with our friend Mike, we're not going to be able to get that.
Do that,
but we could kind of animate it. It'd be something you're probably very familiar with seeing. It's going to be an individual in a casket with their hands crossed.
Exactly.
And there's a reason we do that immediately upon embalming. It's because obviously you embalm the body now, you're going to have preservation, which is going to create the person to stay in a particular position, right?
Exactly. What happens is they do firm up just somewhat, okay? That they'll stay kind of in that position. And what that tells us, if they firm up like that, and that means that the embalming chemical is doing its job. It's fixating the tissues, it's capping the receptors on the cells so that that's not breaking down into water molecules and decomposing and creating other problems. So that's a sign that the whole process worked.
Well, that's good. And that's why people elect to have an embalming process for visitations.
Exactly.
Because visitations could be multiple days upon passing.
Exactly.
Particularly nowadays.
Exactly. And I'd like to also point out the fact that the safest deceased body is an embalmed body, okay? And that's not to say that, those who don't choose embalming, are having any less of a service, but the fact is that when we embalm our loved one, then we can touch them, we can hug them, we can kiss them, and without fear of getting any germs or bacteria or anything like that. They're safe that way.
Right.
Okay? And again, you can go up to them, you can touch their hands, you can touch their body, you can kiss their forehead, or I've had families kiss lips, and it's safe. It's entirely safe because why? We disinfected and we preserved and sanitized.
And understanding that there's various religious beliefs that don't allow for the practice of embalming, but and they have different. They go through different processes and tools to disinfect and sanitize as well.
That's exactly right.
So, however, maybe not as prevalent in what we do, it's still a process that is being practiced out there. By different religious groups.
Exactly.
Okay, so we typically we're not dressing at this point. We're probably going to be placing a fresh linen over the top of the individual. I like to use massage cream. It's basically a moisture barrier, is what it is. It's very similar to after a man shaves and they apply moisture to their face. You're using chemical and an individual, and they're going to begin to dry out. Specifically for men, if you're giving them a fresh shave, you need to apply a moisturizer. The other element to this is during the winter months up here in the northern hemisphere, we have heat coming down. Heat is going to dry out tissue. So we need to create that barrier. So there might be a light layer of a moisturizing cream that would be applied to the face.
Exactly.
That would be wiped off before cosmetizing.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're just putting it there now just to protect as a barrier, like a shield, so again the skin doesn't dry out.
All right, so there you have it. We have well, it's not really a 101. That was probably like
a 102, 103. We
really got into
a little bit there, yeah.
Well, the next step here is we have the remains completely embalmed, completely disinfected, completely sanitized. We are now cleaning our instruments, our tools. We're cleaning the table. We're going to begin to mop the floor where we just worked. We're going to be using disinfectants and bleach to make sure that this area is clean for the next person that comes through. And then the final step that we're doing is going to be cleaning ourselves.
Exactly.
And going about the process of removing all our clothing, our PPEs, which is probably a valid point. We didn't point that out. You and I, for the purpose of this video, are not wearing our mask, not wearing our visor.
Exactly.
I'm not wearing my double gloves. However, I don't normally use a double set of gloves on a normal case. Because I like to be able to have the feeling that you need to do the precision things that we work with.
I understand.
So I'll be using the thicker blue gloves for the embalming, not my smaller 4mm nitrile gloves.
These are better
Very
gloves
standard.
for embalming. They have a higher cuff on them. They're thicker. Okay, they can withstand a lot.
Right. So to kind of wrap this up, we are now going to be taking off our PPEs if we had our full thing on. First step would be to remove.
I think you remove your gloves first, right?
My glove. Well, if you have your booties on, you're going to remove your booties first.
Oh, you're right. Move your booties.
Then you're going to remove your top layer glove.
That's right.
Okay. You could leave the second layer on if you wanted to remove the visor.
That's a good point. Yeah,
because
ideally
they're dry.
They're dry.
Clean,
right. They're still clean. They're still sterile.
So then once you take off the top portion of your PPEs, then you'd be taking off your other glove, and then you're going to begin just a thorough cleansing of your hands, no different than a surgeon would be doing post-op as well.
Exactly.
So I hope that today's video helps you understand a little bit more about what embalmers do, the things that we run into and that we have to deal with on a daily basis. We hope that this brings information to you to make you understand it better, so that if you're planning services for a loved one, you know the work that is going into to make sure that that individual and you have a lasting remembrance of them, and that they're thoroughly and clean, disinfected, embalmed, so that we're having a visitation or a memorial service or a service of some sort, celebration of life, whatever term you want to use, that we're doing it in a safe manner.
Exactly.
John, thank you
Thanks,
very
Jake.
much for
Thanks
your
for
help.
having me.
Is there anything you want to lead off or leave with the viewer about your time as an embalmer, when what you take is the reverence of your profession?
Well, we put a lot of time and effort and a lot of emotion into what we do. And none of this, we don't take any of this for granted. We'll do it at all hours of the day and night. And we do it with love and compassion, and we really believe this. I would not do this if I didn't believe this, and saw the fruits of the labors on the other side as a young individual, how important it is to say goodbye to our loved ones in a beautiful and reverent setting. And so there's nothing sick or mysterious about what we do. We do what we do for the living. We get, or as Thomas Lynch would say, right? We get the dead where they need to go and the living where they need to be.
That's right. That's right. Well, in the very early onset of this series of Undertaker 365, I told you that we would be instilling the efforts of field experts, and I can't thank John enough. John is a constant professional in what he does. He's an excellent embalmer. We are ecstatic that he was able to join us today, and it's always good to have somebody else besides myself telling the viewers how great our industry is and what we do every day. So John, thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time, friends, we'll see you then.
There you have it. I hope that you enjoyed the first ever reality series television show shot here at Vandenberg Funeral Home. I'm Jacob Vandenberg, host of Undertaker 365. Well, I hope you're excited about what you just saw. You're going to see a lot more of that coming out here every Thursday. We're going to be posting at 2 o'clock. It's going to be a reality series. It's going to be the interview series. We're just going to keep inundating you with more information regarding the funeral industry, the wacky and wonderful world of the Vandenberg family here at Vandenberg Funeral Home. So if you like what you see, please don't hesitate to like and follow our page. Follow us on our website, Undertaker365.com, hashtag Undertaker365. You can find us all over the internet. It is my goal and our goal to continue to flood you with funeral information and industry news. As you can see, we got branded material now. Our microphone systems are branded. We're working with our friends at Disrupt Media. So they're helping us with Facebooking and getting all this information out there. So big shout out to them. And then to close this first reality series and encompassing how we've been shooting this first episode underneath the guidelines of the CDC and all this craziness that's going on throughout our globe, this episode will be sponsored by our friend hand sanitizer. I can tell you that we use this religiously. The entire family does, and this is just a small little helping of what we have here at Undertaker 365. Keeping us and our families healthy and safe is number one priority. Because if we're not, we can't bring the show to you. So look forward to seeing you at the next episode. We'll talk to you then. Have a good one.